Hi everyone, I'm Tim, and this is Quote Me on That, a show where we turn inspiration into conversation. This is a brand new show, and I'm going to talk with inspiring and inspired people, musicians and other artists in order to hear their stories and thoughts and share the inspiration. We're going to do interviews in French, English, and Spanish. A few weeks ago, we did a pilot interview with Mexican composer Jose Elizondo, and today I'm very glad and honored to welcome my next guest, and that is Mr. Orlando Cela. Mr. Cela is a world-class flutist, conductor, and music educator with an international career spanning over 2 decades and 3 continents. He was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and has taught and performed music in Europe, North America, and Asia. He's fluent in English, Spanish, and Mandarin, from what I hear. As a flutist, Mr. Cela's track record includes performances in places such as Washington, D.C., Boston, Paris, Berlin, Vienna. He's also published 3 solo albums so far and has a 4th one coming soon, which we will have a chance to talk about. As a conductor, he is currently the music director of the Arlington Philharmonic Orchestra and the Lowell Chamber Ochestra. He's also the founder of the Ningbo Symphony, which he created when he was a visiting professor at Ningbo University in China. He's the recipient of several prizes, including the American Prize for Conducting Youth and Community Orchestras and the Ernst Bacon Memorial Award for Excellence in the Performance of American Music. Last but not least, as a music educator, he is known for his dynamic, enthusiastic workshops and lectures. He's currently assistant professor at Berklee College of Music, where he teaches conducting, and at Middlesex Community College, where he teaches a variety of music classes. Both of those schools are in the Boston area. I read that, in his own words, his style is one where no straight answers are given, and that his students must understand that not even a conductor has all the right answers, and that's okay. Well, I think that's very okay too, but nevertheless, I trust that Mr. Cela will have some straight answers for us today. So good morning, Mr. Cela. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and please call me Orlando. It's okay.
All right. So let's dive right in. I already mentioned a few things in the intro, but just to get us started, what could you tell us about your current situation? Which projects are you working on? What's your ongoing work?
It's actually very nice that you asked me about the current plans that I have and the current projects, because they all revolve around a very brand new orchestra that I just started for the city of Lowell, Massachusetts. It's the Lowell Chamber Ochestra. And we have just finished a recording, which includes a work by Jose Elizondo, of course, and a few other standard repertoire by Johann Sebastian Bach, by Telemann, and by another composer, American composer residing in the Netherlands, Anthony R. Green. And it pretty much says a little bit about my philosophy of running an ensemble. It's important to give light to these new upcoming great composers and put them together with established masters that we know very well. So it's important to give credit to the past, but also to introduce the future of music. So with this in mind, with the Lowell Chamber Orchestra, it's my latest project. I am working on a season that includes very established composers for established pieces, but also new composers that are coming to the fore. For example, I just finished recording a concert that will be aired later this month, which ends with Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring, which is a very well-known piece, but it features 2 other living composers, Bongani Undodana Breen, who happens to be in South Africa, and Evan Williams, who lives in Tennessee, in the United States as well. And in that way, likewise, like I said before, we are promoting new composers and preserving the older traditions.
All right, that's very interesting. Actually, I was going to ask questions about this combination between standard repertoire and contemporary composers. So it's great that you mentioned that already. Maybe about that, what guides your choices of combinations? How do you decide to pair certain contemporary artists with more classical standard artists? How do you go about that?
Okay, I have different thought processes. I always try to base everything around a theme or a particular idea. So when I was curating this last concert that I spoke about, one of the ideas I had was I wanted to center it about around Appalachian Spring, because it's a very well-known piece and I know that it would attract an audience. And I figured that Appalachian Spring talks about a particular snapshot of an American tradition. So I figured if that was a painting, how would it look? It would look like a certain landscape. And then I started to look for works that might mirror that idea. In the case of the piece by Bongani and Dodana Brin, his piece, which is called Maliji Bouye, is inspired by anti-apartheid slogans in the time of Mandela. So it sets the landscape not as a painting, but a political landscape that was very important during that time, a landscape that was looking towards freedom, towards redemption, towards a better country, right? In a way that, Appalachian Spring, it's all about, Renaissance and continuing like a peaceful life. So then I tried to match composers that have written works that are within that idea. Then after extensive research, what I do is I choose the pieces that will correspond best with our forces. So being a chamber orchestra, for example, we cannot do very large pieces, so I have to make sure that I can find pieces that we are able to program correctly for the people that we have engaged. Likewise, the CD that I mentioned before, it was a little bit different, in which I wanted to base it around a very famous orchestral suite by Bach. Instead of looking for pieces, I actually commissioned Jose Elizondo and Anthony R. Green to write works that were similar to those that Bach and Telemann had written in the past. In this case, suites, dance suites. And they both came up with their very own, very creative ideas of how to approach this. So that's how I go about it, just select a theme and then try to find pieces that match our instrumentation and our theme.
That's very interesting. So you mentioned Jose Elizondo, Telemann, Bach. I think that's what those are the works you are planning for the next album, right?
Right. So the album has already been recorded. We're just waiting for it to be released in late January. So the project right now has come down to making sure that all the artwork looks very nice and the promotion is going to come through, and make sure that we have people interested in listening, particularly to this new music, because everybody will know the work by Johann Sebastian Bach. So I want everybody to really pay attention to the new work. So yeah, again, just like expand the repertoire, preserve the old pieces, but promote the new talent.
I would imagine that working on music by contemporary composers can be challenging at times. So I was wondering if you could share with us what was the most challenging or weirdest piece of music by a contemporary composer that you have had to work on to perform or conduct.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to choose, because every contemporary piece that I have done has been really, really different. The ones that are very... The ones that I did that were written in the year 2000 and later have been really, really great and very different in many ways. So I can tell you that I can say that the weirdest piece that I have ever done was a piece by a Venezuelan composer living in Vienna. His name is Jorge Sanchez Chion. And I believe that the title was Elsa Raver of the Super Vixen Obstetrician.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things that it was based on soccer chants, in which the orchestra has to sound like hooligans at the beginning, and then it explodes into this very interesting party of sound. So it really pushes the envelope of what makes classical music classical. So there's a lot of rock and roll in this piece. And in the middle of the piece, the composer, Jorge Sanchez, asked that the conductor turn around and strikes a pose like John Travolta in Saturday Night fever. So I had to do that. And again, it was completely unexpected to the audience. I have to say that I did that with a youth orchestra. So everybody found that too funny to be true, to find one of their professors, one of their teachers, doing such a funny pose. But, I think that's the weirdest piece I have ever conducted. Yeah.
That's cool. Is there a recording of that? Can people find that? All right.
There is a video. I'll make it available to you.
Okay, good. Great. I'm curious. All right. That's already a lot of very interesting material. I was also wondering, maybe more traditionally, about your education as a musician, because you're a music educator yourself. But I was wondering if you could just say a few words about your own education, with maybe about the aspects of your education that you believe had the strongest impact on how your career unfolded, and then also maybe something about why you chose the flute as an instrument and why you became a conductor, or it could be that you're just very good at both, but I was wondering about that.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. I was really lucky in that I attended a school in Venezuela that was founded by a Czech violin teacher, and his name was Emil Friedman. And it was not like the education system in the United States, when there is an elementary school and then you go to another school for middle school and then high school is different. In that case, his school encompassed all the grades. So I went there from kindergarten until I graduated. So that means like 13 years of, I grew up pretty much in that school. One of the things that this wonderful man did, Emil Friedman, is that because he was a classical musician per se, a violinist, he had a conservatory inside the school. So growing up, there was a very strong deal of music in the education system. So, for instance, not only we had to play the recording in elementary school like they do here in the US, but also we all had to learn how to play the Venezuelan cuatro, which is a small 4-string guitar. And we had classes on that. So that was a complement to that. And then at some point during, I believe it was 3rd or 4th grade, I saw somebody that was playing a recorder this way, what I thought it was, right? A flute.
Yeah. Yes.
So then I really liked it and I started to take lessons, and I really got engaged with that. At the same time, I was singing in the chorus, and I really, I don't know, there's something very attractive about music that I like. And then I just started to practice more and study less until I really liked music, and I started to play more in the orchestras of the school, and I was able to learn a lot of music through that experience of playing in the orchestras of the school. I think one of the biggest influences of that school was that it was mostly string players. So when we played in orchestra, what we call the top orchestra at that point, where the old kids were, right? Mm-hmm. It was mostly strings, and then it was just the flute player and another friend of mine who played French horn. And then maybe about 2 or 3 days before the concert, the school would hire professional wind players to fill in the rest of the orchestra. So I had practiced all through the months and weeks my own part, and then I was sitting for 2 or 3 days next to a professional flute player whom I have been playing in the Sinfónica de Venezuela. So that was incredible experience, because then I got to learn from a master who was mentoring me. I had practiced my part, and then I was sitting with somebody who would say, no, do it this way. No, I play this way. And I got to interact with professional musicians since an early age. Very, very, I was playing with them since I was 13 in that capacity. So that was really influential. Then I went to the United States, and I spent 4 years in this very small school in Indiana called DePaul University. And I had a wonderful teacher who was the youngest ever principal flute of the Indianapolis Symphony. She had been, right? At that point, she was no longer in the post, but she was a very, very good teacher. She never gave me straight answers. She only gave me more questions, which I learned to appreciate. And from there, I just came to Boston, where I remain to this day. And during my time in Boston when I was doing masters, I got really interested in conducting, mostly because the conductor that I had in DePaul was a wonderful conductor, or Sidney Smith, and he was a wonderful man, very kind, very clear, very good. And then I came to Boston, and as conductors come and go, sometimes you find them, some are great, some are not so great. So I was thinking, sometimes maybe I can do better than this guy. This man is not so good. So let's try it. So I took all of my conducting classes that I could. And at the end of my flute masters, one of the conducting teachers comes to me and she says, if you take one more year, you can graduate with masters in conducting. So she mentored me. Tamara Brooks mentored me through all of this, and she was the one who was able to guide me through getting that degree. So that's pretty much it. I'm sorry it's so long. It's
no, it's very interesting. And so you graduated flute and conducting when you were how old?
So flute, I graduated. I'm going to have to think about this for a second. Flute, I had my master's when I was 25, and then when I was 26, I had my conducting degree. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So you already mentioned a few encounters and people who have been inspiring to you. Since this show is about inspiration, I was wondering what more you can tell us about maybe a moment or an event or something in your career that you consider that was particularly inspiring to you. It could be an event or a person you met or a project you worked on, or even a combination of those. And so by inspiring, I mean something that gave you new energy, ideas, creative insights in a way that has significantly impacted your understanding of the world and your career after that. What would you say qualifies?
Great. Oh, okay. Well, let's see. I think one of the breaking moments in my music education was when I was doing my 1 year in New England Conservatory in Boston to finish and get my conducting degree. So at that point, one of the most challenging times was having two conducting teachers at the same time. One of them was Tamara Brooks, which I already mentioned, and I was taking lessons as well with another man that was teaching wind ensemble, pretty much. Okay, and what was striking about that was that when I was having lessons or classes with this wind ensemble conductor, he would basically say the word, when you get to here, this is what you want to do. And when you get to this part of the piece, this is what you want to do. And one of the things I was wondering is like, how does he know what I want to do? So I found that very oppressive. I found that very, very closing. So at the same time, I was going to study, and every time I brought a piece to Tamara Brooks, she would ask me questions. Have you considered this? What did the composer write at the same time that they were writing this? What comes before? What comes after? Have you thought about these instruments in the time? So she would overload me with questions and with things that I had to think about. So that was the most important time. One, for example, I remember studying the symphonies of wind instruments by Igor Stravinsky, and the very last chord is a beautiful ending, and the wind ensemble teacher would say, this is simply a C9 chord. And when I was studying the same piece with Tamara, she was telling me, have you looked at the orchestration, at how the notes are organized? If you look closely, you're going to notice that that is going to tell you something very important. And when I looked at that, I realized that it was not what the other man was saying. The other man was just looking at the notes. But if you look at the way that they're organized, there's a chord below and a chord above, very well separated. So suddenly I realized it's not one chord, it's two chords put on top of each other. So that was a breaking moment. One person telling me this is what it is, and another person saying, you have to look deeper. You have to think harder, and you will have another entire perspective on this piece. So.
And so this is also something that you try to teach to your own students, I would imagine. I mean, it makes me think of what I indeed read, that your style is the one where no straight answers are given. I now actually from your story recognize, like I read that just in a few sentences, but I understand now the whole background to the whole thing. Now the corollary of the question about what inspired you would be this. Now I was wondering also, as a teacher, music educator, world-class performer, you were also a source of inspiration for sure to many people around you. Now, if you think about that, how do you hope or wish to be able to be inspiring? What parts of your work or career do you wish are inspiring to others?
Good. Okay. One of the things that I want is to empower the musicians that they are also able to make very educated musical decisions on their own. That as opposed to what we think of a conductor, every musician in the orchestra is their own artist. So one of the things I strive to do when I work with any number of people is to make them part of the whole. So it's not just me as a conductor telling them what to do. I try to engage people and ask them, what do you think of this? How do you feel about this section? Do you like what we just played? Do we need to do it again? And so for the people I work with, I always try to make it a very collaborative atmosphere, because I want them to understand that good ideas and inspiration and good experiences can come from anybody and anywhere. So that is my biggest thing to inspire people about, making sure that they are empowered, that they are musicians, that they are respected, and that their voices are really important, regardless of whether they're conducting or they're playing in an orchestra. And likewise, I try to tell that to my students, especially my conducting students, that they are only, as conductors, they are only the vessel between the piece of music and the musicians who are bringing them to life. That they cannot get into this maestro thinking. There is no such thing as a maestro. That's a myth, and it's a terrible cultural thing that we can think of. Oh, I went to see such and such person conduct. It doesn't matter. The true thing should be, I went to listen to this piece. And whoever is the conductor there should be able to empower the orchestra or the group to bring out the voice of the composer that is in the score. So a conductor should not be a centerpiece. It should be just the bridge between the music and the musicians. That should be the centerpiece. That is something that is very important for my conducting students to know, to get away from the limelight and let the music shine by its own value.
All right, thanks. So I also read things about that, about how you try to connect or help the audience make connections between the music they're about to hear and their own life experience. And I was wondering if you could say something more about that, about maybe what you think the role of music is, or how music can impact lives, or maybe it's not a very, very specific question, but I was intrigued by that idea, that by this link between music that can be recent or old, and then other aspects of life, and how you go about connecting those, and how you see that maybe as the role of music in society. Or
absolutely, yeah, like you said, it's a broad question, but it's a very important one, and there's many ways to approach it. So let's start. I want to mention something. There's a fantastic, or there was, I think he passed already, a wonderful psychologist called Oliver Sacks, who, among other things, did research about how music affects our brain. And it is undeniable, both by his research and by history, that music gives you strength. And music, it's a very powerful force of communication. Anytime that we need to build courage, we might sing a song, right? Every time that we are sad, we might want to sing a song to express our sadness, and so forth. So now, knowing how much of an impact music has, it's not unusual to think that those big dictators of the past, Stalin, for example, he tried to control the musical expression. Mm-hmm. He did not want anybody, just anybody, to be heard. That's why there was so much censorship. And you can see that in other countries as well. So with that in mind, you can say, well, I can use music to send a very strong positive message. In this case, when I program a piece of music by Bongani Undodana Brin, Mayibuye, it's sending a message of hope. And apartheid was a very big problem in South Africa, but there was a sense of hope. And through this piece of music, that sense of hope for a better future is transferred onto another performance and onto another generation. And when people hear this music and know the provenance, then they can see, yes, there is hope. There is hope now. There will be hope in the future, just like it was in the past, okay? So with this music that represents that very powerful time period and that very powerful idea of let's hope and fight for a better future, you continue that progress of mankind into trying to strive and be doing something better. In the CD that I'm about to release with the orchestra, there's a work by Anthony Green in which the second movement of his suite, it's inspired by 3 African-American women who had to strive against slavery. One of them was the very first African-American woman to buy her own freedom. Another one was the first one to be African-American woman published. And I regret to say I cannot remember the third one, but they're visionaries, they're heroes. And by putting their history in a piece of music, that history will be preserved. And in the future, when somebody listens to this music and looks at the story behind it, they will be inspired to continue this process. So that is very important in the value of music, to be able to program something that is very important and relevant. Now, having said that, music, it's about entertainment too. So it's a little bit of a balance, right? Music, for me, has, and this is one of the philosophies behind the orchestra, is to promote, educate, and preserve. So promote the new ones, the new music, but also educate folks about music and the power it has and the history, and also preserve the old music style that has inspired this new composer. So building a bridge between past and future that says music is entertaining, yes, but it's also very powerful, and it has a very powerful message to all of us audience.
All right. I like how everything comes together, and you know, the music, the history, the fact that you are also an educator, and I now understand that being a music educator is also a very important part of the whole thing, because I really like what you say about music pieces carrying history, but then at the same time it's important that we have first people, or you know, sources to tell us the story, because the music itself in a way is only connected to the history if there's somebody to remember it or something like that. So I really love how this whole goes together, the musician part, the education part, and the all right. So yeah, I'm also very actually now interested to and excited to hear the album and to listen to it, knowing more about the background of what you said. It's nice because now we've talked about many things that I wanted to talk about, but in a very different order than I had imagined, which is perfectly fine. But so I'm just checking a little bit on my notes now. But I was maybe wondering more anecdotally than now about if you had any other stories that you would like to share, because when you talked about the contemporary piece, that was quite funny. I don't know if there are other situations you've been in that were funny or quirky in a way that you would like to share or tell us now.
Absolutely. This goes back with music education, okay? And how it's important to always know a piece of music, and then how it's important to know the story behind the piece, okay? there is a wonderful Scottish composer, Alvin Pritchard. I think it's Alvin or Alwyn Pritchard. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce her name. She is an incredibly avant-garde composer, fantastic, fantastic woman. She tells the story about a conversation she had with a conductor, and a conductor told her, how much of an orchestra piece would you write for me if I give you £1 sterling? So what she did is she wrote a piece of music for orchestra, huge orchestra, that is 1 second long.
Okay.
This piece of music, it gets better because it's 1 second long, but it has 2 movements. So it has 2 parts to it, right? It's 1 second long. So what I did is I programmed this with the orchestra of the North Carolina Governor's School. Again, young people, it's young people from high school, okay? And the audience for this high school was their parents and grandparents and friends and whatnot, right? So we are preparing this piece, which is only 1 second long, in which each of the movements are half a second each. And there's a pause in the middle. So here's where the genius of Alvin Pritchard is. If you have 1 second of music split in between 2, then the question is, when does the performance start and end? And notice how we as audience, we decide when we are hearing to a concert and we're not hearing a concert. And the other thing is about this piece of music is how much preparation does a piece of music need despite of its length. This piece of music is really thick, it's really dense with music material. It just happens to happen very, very quickly. So here comes the anecdote. So we're playing this performance for the parents. And the very first time I performed it in the same concert, we did it twice. The first time I just played it and I didn't say anything. And then the audience reacted very puzzled and they clapped very, very, strange. They were trying to be polite. Mm-hmm. Then I explained to them exactly what I explained to you. We performed it again and the audience loved it. So again, as you can see, it's a piece of music that deserves to be known and understood and thought about. It's not just a simple happening. There's a lot of thought going behind this piece. I mean, there's a lot of detail, and we did rehearse a lot. But again, the point of the story is, if you played it before without any background knowing about it, you might not appreciate it. But if you know about this, about the origins, about the ideas behind it, and then you bring that to life, then people can engage and can get together. Now, I'm just telling you about a completely new piece of music that is very strange, that is very weird. But you can find the same exact stories about very well-known pieces of music that we take for granted, that we might have heard 1,000 times on the radio, right? You can take any of the Beethoven symphonies, and if you do a little research, you should be surprised about the things that are in these Beethoven symphonies that you might have heard long ago. So yeah, I mean, music education and knowing about the whys and the whens and the hows of this music that we know, it's very important. It's very important.
About your future projects now, we mentioned already the album coming pretty soon, but if we're now not thinking about specific projects that are already planned, but more generally, things that you might work on in the future, what are the things that you wish you could work on in coming years or decades from a musical point of view? Maybe those are things that you want to do, people you want to work with. What would that be?
One of the things I would like to do in a while, right? It's not only to grow the Lowell Chamber Orchestra to do a few more concerts, but also to have a youth orchestra attached to it as well. Again, it goes back to what we were talking about, music education. Okay, I think it's important for young children to engage with music from an early age. And along with that project, it's important for me to continue to grow the orchestra into promoting new music alongside, known pieces. So if you have a youth orchestra that starts to play from the very early age the music of living minority composers, people who might be of different races, women composers, then by the time they grow to being adults, they will appreciate not only the tradition of music written in the 1800s, but they want to appreciate all of these new voices that are coming through. And in order to do this, I'm hoping to maybe not only have the youth orchestra, but have a place where people can take lessons, not at school per se, but get mentors that can continue this labor of educating and making sure that our future generations appreciate the new voices of music just as much as they appreciate the old voices of music.
Very good. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, thank you. Me too. Well, come back in 10 years. Maybe we'll have something. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, gladly. All right. Well, I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if you ever have anything more that you would like to share, or anything else that you would like to talk about. As I said, we have touched upon many things that I had imagined, but in a very different order, which is perfectly okay. But so yeah, maybe you have something more that you wanted to say or wish to share.
I can't think of anything right now. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Do we know when the new album will be out exactly? I think we
yes, January 22nd.
All right. Okay, so coming pretty soon, but still we have to wait until next year. All right. Well, if people want to know more about you, your work as a conductor, flutist, educator, they can find you on the internet at orlandocela.com. So Cela, C-E-L-A. Also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. That way they can also be very well aware of the album coming out. So, well, thanks again, Orlando, for talking to me. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Tim. The pleasure was mine.
Maybe we can talk later in 10 years or before that. We'll see how
or
it
sooner.
goes.
Yes.
Or sooner. All right. Many thanks to everybody who watched this at home. I'm Tim. This is Quote Me on That. We turn inspiration into conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.